Calaroga Shark Media.
Happy 4th of July. Hi, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Eddie Murphy was on the New York Times Conversation. I saw the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group, talking about this one. I held on to it so I'd have something in the leadoff position on July 4th. Pretty interesting interview. I did share it in the Facebook group. Again, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. No, I didn't share it. That's a lie. That's a conflation. I didn't share it. I was going to share it, but Dylan shared it. Thank you, Dylan. And they remind us that at one point, Saturday Night Live was kind of on the thin ropes, and Eddie Murphy helped bring it back through sheer force of charisma, writes the Times, as well as instantly iconic, hilariously unpredictable recurring characters like Gumby and Mr. Robinson. Eddie brought the show back to life. A highly plausible argument can be made that without him, SNL may not have made it to a 10th anniversary, let alone the 50th. I agree. It would have been really easy to put on Saturday night videos. I was watching Friday night videos on... It was on YouTube, a full episode with bumpers and everything. The first song was The Police, Synchronicity 2, and then it went into Paul McCartney, No More Lonely Nights. There was Lionel Richie, and I'm like, this is wonderfully terrible. But I love that show. I lived in Queens. We didn't get cable till 1987, and not because my parents were cheap. Queens in New York City was not wired for cable television until 1987. You couldn't get it. So Friday night videos and a channel called U68 was all we had. If you're from the New York City metro area, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Eddie, back when the first Beverly Hills Cop came out, did you feel you understood what it was about you that met the moment so perfectly? Eddie Murphy said, no, not even in retrospect. I was 22 when I got to do Cop and 20 years old when I started doing 48 Hours. Now I look back at those times and I trip about how young I was. Back then, I kind of took it for granted. One thing that led to another, and I wound up on a movie set. Then when stuff worked and became hit movies, I was like, okay, that's what it's supposed to be. Will Eddie Murphy go back to stand-up? Eddie says, I used to have little periods where I'd be like, I'm going to do it again. The closest I got to doing it again was right before the pandemic, because I had done Saturday Night Live and I was like, let me go do one stand-up special and bring it all full circle. Then the pandemic hit, and when you're stuck in the house for 2 years, I wasn't going, when I get out of here, I want to do stand-up again. Here's a good analogy. It's like somebody was in the military, they were on the front line in Vietnam, and they got all these medals because they did all this amazing stuff. Then they moved up and became a general. So it's like going to the general and saying, hey, you ever think about going back to the front line? You want to have bullets whiz past your ear again? No. Eddie, was Elvis the influence behind some of the onstage stuff you wore when doing stand-up? I'll jump in there. I think Richard Pryor was definitely an influence there. Watch Sunset Strip and then watch Eddie's stuff. Similar outfit. Eddie said, Elvis had a huge influence on me, though. Leather suits and Raw, I come out, I have a scarf. I was rolling like Elvis, too. I didn't have the Memphis Mafia, but I had my little crew of dudes. In the same way you see me dressed in Delirious and in Raw, I used to dress like that in the streets. I was totally in my Elvis trip. And when I got older, I was like, oh my God, Elvis wasn't cool at all. Elvis was going through some stuff. Now, Michael Jackson, that whole red jacket thing in Thriller's after Delirious when I own the red suit. I'm not saying he was influenced, but I had on the red jacket before. Eddie, do you understand what you mean to comedians like Kevin Hart and Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock and Chris Tucker? Eddie said, well, I didn't lay down a path. They took their own path. The comic used to be the sidekick. The comic was the opening act, and I changed it to where the comic can be the main attraction. That's fair. They thought of comics one way, and I was like, no, a comic could sell out the arena, and a comic could be in a $100 million movie. All that changed. And with black actors, it was like the black guy could be the star of the movie, and it doesn't have to be a black exploitation movie. It could be a movie that's accessible to everyone all around the world. The Hollywood Reporter did a comedy roundtable. Taylor Tomlinson was on it. The question, Taylor, you said that audiences weren't as interested in hearing you tackle darker subject material like your mother dying when you were younger. How did you gauge that, and when did it shift? Taylor said, I just started really young, so watching a 19-year-old do stand-up at all is very uncomfortable. People are already scared for you and nervous about the show, so I don't think I had the maturity as a performer to pull those jokes off. It took a few years of performing anywhere and everywhere you could. How do you know when something's not working, Taylor Tomlinson? She says, people aren't laughing, and it's devastating. It's what you would call a bad show. For other people, it's when people are laughing too much, and you're like, none of this is new. No, it's when people are sad and uncomfortable and looking at you like, are you almost done? What's so great about stand-up is that you know pretty quickly if something does or doesn't work. Jackie Novak was on the round table, and she fielded the question, are there subjects that the rest of you have felt audiences wouldn't go with you? And Jackie said, yeah, but Birbiglia said something to me like, there's your agenda, and there's the audience's agenda, or the booker's agenda. Work your agenda. For me, that meant I'm going to put my show up in New York, but I need to work it out first, and so I'm doing it at the Jukebox in Peoria, so I know it's going to land well. I mean, some people might find it interesting, but I'm planting my feet and saying the words, and maybe I'm burning my chance in the room. Or I did it at the Punchline in Philly, and my boyfriend, we talk about it now, and he's like, yeah, the way you went up in Philly and just bombed was great. You had to do the thing you did. And I was like, I bombed? I was always like, what do you mean? I stood up there doing my art. It was almost delusion, required delusion. But this phrase, my agenda, really helped me almost not listen to the crowd. And it was huge for me. My agenda. Doesn't matter. Tonight, everyone in this room might hate me. This club will never hire me again. And I had a lot of bad nights before the run at the Cherry Lane Theater. Nights where I just had to stand there and say my words and get them in my head. The 800-pound gorilla put together a list of the best comedy specials of 2024 so far. Next weekend, like on the 13th, I talked to two of the executives at the 800-pound gorilla website. So that'll be the Saturday interview in about 10 days. This Saturday, Alex Bennett, longtime radio personality with ties to the comedy scene, is the Saturday summer interview. Anyway, the gorilla has the 10 best comedy specials of 2024, and I like this list because it doesn't match mine at all, and it reminded me of a bunch of specials I need to catch up on. And this will be a good weekend for that, right? And plus, it's July 4th. I have to watch Jaws tonight. On their list, Fern Brady, Autistic Bikini Queen. Donnell Rawlings, A New Day. I can't remember if I clicked on that one or not. Dusty Slate, Workin' Man. I love that one. I didn't drop the G there. That's not a Queen's accent. The title is called Workin' with no G, man. Keith Robinson's Different Strokes on Netflix. Haven't gotten to that one yet. I was shotgunning The Bear. I wanted to watch the entire Bear before I got spoiled. I have completed it now. I won't spoil it for you. I'm also trying to keep up on The Boys, and I can only watch about 90 minutes of TV in one sitting, and then I fall asleep. Rami Youssef's More Feelings. I didn't like the direction on that one, even though I really like Rami. Alex Edelman's Just For Us. I keep forgetting to watch that one. That one is on proper HBO. Dan Licata's For the Boys. I'm hearing great stuff about that. That's on YouTube. Neil Brennan's Crazy Good. Like Neil, I feel like perhaps possibly maybe somehow someone added some accidental crowd noise. I'm sure nobody meant to do it, but the mix just sounded suspicious to Johnny Mac, and I punched out on it. Sal Vulcano's Terrified, hearing good things about that one. That one's on YouTube. Taylor Tomlinson's Have It All. That's on my list. And I know I do this frequently, but let me just skim my list really quickly for you in case you're looking for something to watch this weekend. My list, Roast of Tom Brady, Dave Attell, Hot Cross Buns on Netflix, Triumph, You Lucky Bastards, YouTube, David Cross, Worst Daddy in the World, YouTube, Dusty Slay, Kyle Kinane, YouTube, Dirt Nap has an all-time 15-minute chunk about Fast and the Furious, Dimitri Martin on Netflix, Jimmy Carr, Netflix, Cat Williams, Hannah Gadsby's Gender Agendas on Netflix, Brian Simpson, Tig Notaro, Taylor Tomlinson, Rachel Feinstein, also Unfrosted, the Jerry Seinfeld movie, and Gianmarco Ceresi's recent 15 minutes that he dropped on YouTube last week or this week. All highly recommended, and this is reminding me too, Vulture had a list. There's a couple things I want to catch up on this weekend, so let me just remind myself. Oh, I need to add Nathan McIntosh, Down with Tech, to my list. That's on YouTube as well. I'll do that now. One of the ones I want to check out that Vulture recommends, Christina Catherine Martinez's How to Bake a Cake in the Digital Age. That's on YouTube. I also want to check out Natasha Vainblatt's World Dads here on YouTube. And let's keep the podcast tight today so we can all hit the beach or do whatever it is you do on July 4th. That's your comedy news for today. Back tomorrow with a normal episode. See you then.